Hello and welcome to What's in the Night Sky for December 2023. My name's Hayley and this month's highlights include the Geminid's meteor shower, the bright planets of Venus, Jupiter and Saturn, ray craters on the moon and the constellation of Taurus the Bull. Let's start by taking a look at the planets. We'll begin with Venus, which is a morning planet in December, meaning that the best time to observe it is in the early hours of the morning before the sun rises. You can see I'm looking towards the south on the 1st of December and it's about 3:30 in the morning. I'm going to bring time onwards and you can see Venus rising over there in the east just before 4 o'clock in the morning. One of the great things about this time of year is we get plenty of time before the sun rises, so you'll get plenty of time to observe Venus before the sky starts to brighten and it will be time to stop observing. The best time to look for Venus is towards the beginning of the month, because as the month goes on, Venus rises later and later and you'll get less time with it before the sun rises. If we go back to 3:30 again, but look at the end of the month and just see what time Venus rises. So it was rising just before 4 o'clock on the 1st of December. And you can see that you have to wait a lot longer at the end of December before Venus pops its head up over the horizon. There we go. So just after 5 o'clock by the end of December. But it should still be a good planet to observe all the way through the month. If we head on into the evening sky now, so I'm going to go back to the 1st and I'm going to go just before 5 o'clock in the evening. So you can see that the sun is setting and we've got Jupiter and Saturn already visible in the evening sky looking towards the southeast. Both Jupiter and Saturn are well placed for observing throughout the month, but like Venus, they're better at the beginning of the month because they set earlier as the month goes on. So if we have a look through the evening here on the 1st, from when the sun sets, you've got Saturn visible until around 9 o'clock, or just after 9 o'clock. And then Jupiter all the way until the early hours of the morning. So setting just after 4 o'clock, it looks like. If we do the same thing at the end of the month, so we start observing at dusk and then keep an eye on Saturn over here as we go into the evening, and you can see that Saturn has already set before 9 p.m. and then Jupiter setting at around 3 a.m. So both of them are still visible for a good portion of the night towards the end of the month, but if you want the longest possible viewing window for Jupiter and Saturn and Venus, then the beginning of the month is the best time to do that. Let's move on to the moon now. So new moon is on December the 12th, and that is very nicely timed for the Geminid's meteor shower, which I'll come on to later. And full moon occurs on the 26th of December. And I'm going to take us there right now. So if we take a look at the full moon on the 26th, and the reason I want to look at the full moon is because I want to talk about ray craters. So a few months ago we had the Tycho crater as our moon watch target for the month, which is this extremely bright ray crater over here. And this month I want to tell you about two more famous ray craters on the moon, and they are the Copernicus and Kepler craters, which I'm just pointing to with my mouse now, quite close to the really bright Aristarchus crater over here. So I'm going to put my mouse on Copernicus. Copernicus is 56 miles across and it's a little bit easier to see than Kepler. So Kepler's the one over here because it's a bit bigger. And the great thing about these craters is the system of rays, these lines that are coming outwards from the craters, you can see them really well on Tycho down here, make the craters much easier to spot, and you should be able to see those rays really easily with a pair of binoculars. So if you have a pair of binoculars, go out, see if you can find Tycho first, and then Kepler and Copernicus ray craters. And the rays are formed by material that's thrown out of the crater on impact and gets thrown across the moon and makes these beautiful bright lines of material. through a telescope. If you take a look at the Copernicus crater with a telescope, then you might be able to spot some of the detail, that the crater has terraced walls, and it has not one but three central peaks inside the crater, so three little mountains inside the crater caused by material falling back into the crater after impact. It's named after Nicholas Copernicus, who in the 1500s suggested that planets orbit the sun rather than the Earth, which was a very radical idea at the time. And if we go across to Kepler, so Kepler is 20 miles across and is named after Johannes Kepler, who famously came up with the three laws of planetary motion in the early 1600s. So both of these named after scientists who contributed really important ideas to astrophysics. Let's follow the moon over the course of the month now. So I'm just going to zoom out and go back to the beginning of the month. So you can see that the moon is a gibbous phase at the start of December, and it's in Gemini. If we go forward by one day to the 2nd, so in the morning sky on the 2nd of December, it's here in the constellation of Cancer. I'm just going to zoom in and click on a random star just down here, so I can put my binocular view on, and it will show us that the moon is in the vicinity of the Beehive cluster, so an open star cluster in Cancer. If you've not seen it before, then this might be an opportunity. Although the gibbous moon will be providing a lot of light and it will wash out some of the light from these stars, it might still be a good opportunity to have a look at the Beehive cluster. So if you've got a pair of binoculars, train them on the moon and then have a look downwards, and you might be able to see the Beehive cluster. If we keep going, so I'm just going to zoom out a bit more. And if we follow the moon to the 9th of December, morning of the 9th of December, and we're going to go a little bit later. So heading towards 4 o'clock in the morning, and you should see that the moon is rising with Venus. So it's a nice opportunity to see the moon and Venus together. The moon by this stage is a crescent moon. We said that new moon occurs on the 12th, so it's only a few days away from new moon, and a really good opportunity to see the really bright morning planet of Venus and the thin, faint crescent moon together in the same part of the sky. If we move onwards now, we're going to go into the evening sky actually, so I'm just going to go to say just after 7 o'clock, and I'm going to go to the 17th of December. So here we are on the 17th in the evening sky, and you can see that we've gone past new moon now, we're back to a crescent phase again, and the moon appears nice and close to Saturn on the 17th. And if we take a look at what happens over the following days, we can see that it's moving across the sky towards Jupiter, and by the time we get to the 21st and the 22nd, it's quite close to Jupiter on both of those days. 22nd is a slightly closer approach, and if we zoom in a little bit, you can see that by now we're at a gibbous phase, getting ready for the full moon on the 26th. If we go a little bit further towards the full moon to the 24th, then you can see that the moon is in Taurus, which is our constellation of the month for this month, and it's quite close to the Pleiades star cluster, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. Let's have a think about the Geminid's meteor shower now. So we can see the constellation of Gemini over here, the twins, quite close to Taurus. And the Geminids may be a spectacular sight this year. It's a meteor shower that has a fairly high rate of meteors around the peak, so that's good news. And this year the moon will be out of the way because we'll only be shortly after new moon. And often if you are trying to observe a meteor shower and there's a bright moon in the sky, then it's going to wash out a lot of those meteors and you're not going to get as good an experience. The Geminis last year were hampered by the moon, so it's going to be quite nice to observe them this year without the moon in the way. You might spot Geminid meteors all the way through December if you're out observing anyway. So from early December, you might spot the odd Geminid, but the peak occurs on the 14th of December. And the best nights to observe are the nights around the peak. So the night of the 13th into the 14th and the night of the 14th into the 15th. So if I just take us to the 14th of December. There we go. And I'm going to put meteor showers on so you can see where the radiant of the meteor shower is. So the radiant is up here. So by the head of one of the twins, by the head of Castor in Gemini. And the best thing to do with all meteor showers is to go outside in the darkest location that you can, wrap up nice and warm. Don't underestimate how cold you might get because you'll be sitting or lying in one position. So get really, really nice and warm. Let your eyes adapt for about 20 minutes to the dark and then sit back and enjoy the show. If you have a nice reclining chair or a sun lounger to lie on, that can help. You can get under a blanket maybe. Remember not to look at any sources of white light after your eyes have adapted because you'll ruin your dark adaptation if you do that. If you need a light, you can use a red torch. That can help. And some of the stargazing apps that you can get on your phone, some of those have a red filter mode that you can use as well. And look at any part of the sky that you like. You don't need to look towards Gemini. You can if you want to, but you don't need to. And look at an altitude of around 60 degrees is best. So if you look just over halfway up in the sky from the horizon up to the point overhead, that's a good part of the sky to look at. And see how many Geminis you can spot. If you want to, you could sketch them. You can sketch their how bright they are and note their direction. If you note the direction of the meteors, if they are Geminids, they should track back towards the radiant in Gemini. You can go out and look for Geminids at any time of the night. The best time is always going to be when the radiant is as high as possible. So if you look at the moment, we're just before 8 o'clock and it's not very high. If we go through the evening, it does get higher as the evening goes on. So if you're going out with kids or something and you want to go out around 8 o'clock, that's fine. Staying out later into the early hours of the morning is good if you can do it, or starting later if you only want to stay out for a couple of hours is also a good thing to do. Let's take a look at our constellation of the month now, which is Taurus the Bull. So let's take the meteor shower labels off just to make the sky a little bit less busy, and go around to Taurus. So Taurus is one of my favourite constellations because it's really bright, it's quite easy to spot, there's lots to see. If you don't manage to spot it straight away, a really good way to spot Taurus is to use Orion's belt. So if you look at the 3 stars of Orion's belt, if you go backwards and down, sort of follow this line, that takes you to Sirius, which is known as the dog star, the brightest star in the northern sky. And if you go the other way, it will take you to Taurus. And this bright star, Aldebaran, which is a red giant star. And if you're looking at Taurus, even with your naked eye, you should be able to make out the orange hue of the star. And it's often described as the angry eye of the bull, glaring back down at Orion the hunter. Interestingly, the Pioneer 10 probe is heading towards Aldebaran and will make its closest pass to the star in about 2 million years' time. If we have a look at the other interesting parts of the Taurus constellation, so this triangular shape is known as the Hyades star cluster. It's the nearest open cluster to the solar system, and it contains around 200 stars nestled within the horns of the bull. And the triangular shape, or the V shape, is to represent the face of the bull. And Aldebaran is actually not technically part of the cluster because it's much closer to us than the other stars in the Hyades cluster. So let's put the constellation art on and and see Taurus depicted as the bull staring back at Orion. And in Greek mythology, Taurus represents Zeus transforming himself into a white bull to win the affection of the princess Europa. Europa climbed onto the bull's back and he swam across the Mediterranean and took her to Crete. If we wanted to have a look at some deep sky objects in the constellation of Taurus, the easiest and favourite one would be the Pleiades open star cluster over here. And this is something that you can spot with your naked eye, even in a light polluted area. They're not too difficult to see. They look really great in a small telescope or a pair of binoculars. As I've said many times on these videos, the Pleiades is my favourite binocular object because I think they look really, really good in binoculars. They almost look like a mini Big Dipper, the shape of them, and you can maybe see if you can make that out when you have a look for yourself. Let's finish by taking a look at the International Space Station. So I like to tell you each month about at least one bright pass of the International Space Station that you might be able to spot if you have clear skies. So in December, the ISS is sometimes otherwise known as Santa, making his way back to the North Pole after delivering the presents. So to see that, if you go out on the 25th of December at 6 o'clock, so if you're up nice and early on Christmas Day and you have a clear sky, if you head out at 6 o'clock and look towards the west, you might spot the ISS making its way across the night sky. And if you have any small excitable people on Christmas Day, they might like to come out and join you, and it will take 5 or 6 minutes for the ISS to make its way across the sky all the way from the west, trekking its way over to the east where it will set. That brings me to the end of my night sky tour for December, and I wish you clear skies for all of your observing this month.